Hi everyone. Today we're going to present our report about exporting grapes from Peru to the United States. The United States is one of the most important destinations for Peruvian grapes. We know that every year the demand for high quality fruits continues to increase, which gives Peruvian exporters a great opportunity to expand their business, but only if they follow all the access requirements of the USA market. The main objective of our report is to identify those access requirements, understand the authorities and standards that control them, and give some recommendations for companies that want to improve their position in the market. These requirements are not only rules, these are essentials to guarantee that products are safe, clean, and in good quality. They help to protect consumers and agriculture, and they also build trust between trading partners and the companies. By meeting these standards, Peruvian exporters can make their product more competitive and open new opportunities in international trade.
Our research focuses on three main objectives. First, to identify the access requirements that exporters of grapes must meet to enter the US market. For example, phytosanitary, food safety, and quality requirements. Second would be to examine the standards, accreditation bodies, and authorities involved in both the country of origin and the country of destination. In the case of Peru, it can be SENASA, and in the case of the US, it can be the FDA or the Agricultural Marketing Services. Finally, it would be to provide recommendations on how exporting companies can get a better position in the market in the USA through regulatory compliance, international certificates like Global GAP, and an efficient supply chain management. In order to export grapes to the USA, there are some requirements that need to be followed in order to access the market successfully. First would be the phytosanitary requirements, in which the US asks exporters that the grapes need to be free from pests and plant diseases. This is mostly done at the country of origin, so in the case of Peru, it would be done by SENASA. Second would be food safety, in which the US asks for the fruit to be clear, ready to eat, and traceable. This to ensure that the hygiene process was done during the whole thing. In the case of supermarket and buyers, sometimes all the requirements don't come directly from the US government, but from the buyers that tend to opt for options that have accreditations in the Global GAP or the Ministry of Agriculture. Lastly, it would be the transport, which is very important for grapes. They need to have special containers to keep them fresh during the whole trip and also to maintain them free from any contamination.
So now let's talk about access requirements. These are requirements that are put in place to protect human health and agriculture of a country by setting certain standards of safety, and this can vary between country to country. But these cannot be unjustified or protectionist, which means they need to have a scientific basis behind them. And how do these look in practice? So these can take the form of maximum residue levels, or MRLs, or restrictions for certain pesticides or GMOs, or certain additives, and are also required treatments or storage conditions. Um, and I want to make a distinction between regulatory requirements, which are legal requirements that the government of a country requires, and standards, which are often voluntary, but oftentimes can be almost mandatory if the legal authority explicitly requires them, or if it's just standard practice in the industry. And market entry requirements include things such as certifications that you can get for being more competitive in the foreign market and aligning with consumer preferences there. Now let's look at some specifics for this sector. So we're exporting grapes. Grapes are called fresh produce, and this means that all the requirements that we've previously talked about are that much more important and should be considered as very critical if we want to export to the international markets. One example is characteristics such as size, shape, and weight can be very specific. For example, the Codex Alimentarius, which lays out a bunch of different international standards for different goods and products, gives exporters a strict thresholds so that they can measure if their grapes, for example, meet the ripeness to qualify for international quality, and Yeah, things like sugar acid ratio that we need to be aware of and learn about before this. Another consideration is pesticides and diseases that may infect grapes. And this is not only a concern for farmers in the production stage, but it's also a concern for exporters. For example, the United States requires all grapes from Chile to undergo a specific treatment just to eliminate the risk that they might be carrying grapevine moth, which might not have spoiled the grapes, but it might have an impact on domestic agriculture in the United States. Finally, some considerations when we're entering the US market, especially for grapes, are the demand for different varieties in the US. For example, varieties such as Cotton Candy, Sweet Globe, or Candy Dreams are really popular, and these are sweet, really sweet, and customers in the States prefer much sweeter berries and will pay a premium price for it. And another consideration is the United States' reliance on exports of grapes from Chile. So, since Peru has a climate and a geography that's very similar to Chile, it's a really good um, exporter for importers who want to cover a trade demand if the supply from Chile declines. So, we have good opportunity here.
Peragro operates in Peru, a country with a strong agro-industrial sector focused on exports of fresh products such as asparagus, grapes, and pecans. In Peru, the main institutions that regulate and guarantee product quality are INACAL, SENASA, and Minagri or Mincentro. INACAL is the Instituto Nacional de Calidad, is responsible for setting national standards and aligning them with international frameworks like ISO, but we will see this later. When exporting to the United States, program must comply with regulations enforced by the USDA and the FDA. The USDA through its agency APHIS and the FDA under the Food Safety Modernization Act. In the European Union, the main authority is the EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority. Then we have the EU regulations that set clear rules for food hygiene and traceability. Moreover, program must comply with Global Gap, widely recognized certifications for good agricultural practices and for certain products like organic pecans or blueberries. The EU requires organic certifications under Regulation 2018 and 848. To maintain access to demanding global markets, ProAgro holds several international certifications. Among the most important are Global GAP, which ensures responsibility agricultural practices, HACCP, which identifies and controls food safety risk, ISO 91, quality management standard that helps maintain consistent process, and BASC, which ensures supply chain security. These certifications demonstrate that ProAgro commitment to international standards and help strengthen the trust of global buyers in its products. Peru's system mainly focuses on export certifications and phytosanitary safety, led by SENASA and INEGAL, which ensures products meet ISO-based quality standards. In contrast, the US and the EU emphasize consumer protection, food safety, and traceability, regulated by agencies such as the FDA, USDA, and the EFSA, and verified through certifications like Global Gap and BRC. Despite this difference, all share commitment to international standards such as ISO and the Codex Alimentarius, as well as the third-party audits and growing attention to sustainability and environmental care.
Now I will explain the role of the competitive authorities that supervise grape export from Peru to the United States. In Peru, the main authority is SENASA. SENASA inspects vineyards and packing plants to make sure that all grapes are free from pests and diseases. It also issues the phytosanitary certificate, which is an essential document for exporting to the USA. Another important institution is INACAL. INACAL accredits laboratories and certification body, ensuring that all testing and quality systems meet international standards. Additionally, for Peru, we have Minagri and Mincetur. These two coordinate export producers and maintain communication with the USA authorities through BUS. From the part of the United States, we have the APIS that control the import of fresh produce, and it also checks phytosanitary certificates, inspects shipments, and prevents the introduction of pets. Then we have the FDA that verifies that import fruits are safe and properly handled. Finally, we have the USA Custom and Border Protection. This checks all documentations and can stop shipments if they do not meet the import requirements. Together, these authorities inspect, certificate, verify, and monitor every step of the process to guarantee that Peruvian grapes arrive in the United States market safely and in a full, completely international standards.
Okay, findings and recommendations. The United States requires strict phytosanitary rules and the cold treatment T107A1. SENASA, APHIS, USDA, and FDA oversee the export process and all compliance steps. Exporter must meet residual limits and food safety rules to access the market. Many buyers request certification like Global Gap, BRC, or SQF. The US market prefers sweet, high-quality grapes and values cold chain control and good packaging. For companies, stress them pest control and hygiene practice to ensure clean and complaint fruit. Maintain strict cold chain management during storage and transportation. Obtain key certifications such as Global Gap, BRC, or SQF to access top use buyers. Monitors EPA residual limits and adjusts pesticide, pesticide use to stay within allowed levels. Focus on planning and exporting sweater high demand varieties to improve competitiveness. For policy markers, improve training programs for farmers and packers on use marker requirements. Expand support for certification process to help exporters meet global standards. Strengthen coordination between SENASA, Custom, and BUCE to speed up inspections. Promote investment in cold chain infrastructure in production regions. Enhance information system to help exporters check, update LMRS and regulations. Now the conclusions. Exporting fresh grapes from Peru to the United States is completely feasible, but it requires strict compliance with phytosanitary, sanitary, and food safety regulations. The cold treatment T107A1 prepared documentation and the oversight of SENASA, APHIS, USDA, and FDA are essential to ensure safe market entry. Quality, temperature control, and meeting residual limits strongly influence acceptance in the US market. Certifications such as Global Gap, BRC, or SQF increase the credibility of exporters and improve access to high value buyers. Consumer preference in the US show a clear shift toward sweeter and premium varieties, creating opportunities for Peruvian producers who adapt to these trends, strengthening supply chain management, compliance system, and coordination between public and private actors will enhance Peru's competitiveness in the US grape market.